And we are back with Ted and your dreaded economist. And so we are going to move forward from those different types of economies and economic systems to the role of the government, roles that the government can play when it comes to that mixed economy that we're talking about, people in the government working together. So government, first thing, they're supposed to be protecting people's property. That's right. So the government, they actually step in when it comes to intellectual property or anything that's copyrighted, and they protect you and your stuff. Nobody can just come up and take something from you. Everything has to be something known as voluntary exchange. Involuntary exchange is that, it's theft. So government is there to step in and offer contracts or patents for ideas or intellectual property to make sure that nobody else can take it from you. So bam! Protecting property rights. Alright, so thing two, the government provides for public goods and services. So you need to know there's a difference between private and public goods. Private goods are things that are privately owned, and so they are not shared freely amongst the general population. But the government, what they do is they take tax money from, taxpayers like us, cha-ching. They take our tax money and they build things like public libraries and roads and sidewalks and public parks, and that's free for everybody to use. So that's a public good versus a private good. Taking a selfie while taking a video. This is weird. Hey! In a market economy, we're pretty efficient with making sure that everybody has enough to satisfy their needs or wants, mostly, for the most part. But there are still some people out there that struggle. And so what the government does is also from that tax money that they collect, they also help to provide those public goods and services. They use some of that tax money from taxpayers as well to do these transfer payments. And transfer payments basically are taking tax money from the wealthier and just redistributing it to the economically disadvantaged. So boom, another role, another good role. All right, we are on to number 4 role of the government, and this is promoting competition. So think of it this way: if we still have private ownership in this mixed market economy that we live in, we still have mostly private ownership. That means that there's going to be a huge gap in people that have money and people that don't, especially with businesses. And so these businesses, what was happening before the government stepped in, these corporations would form huge organizations called trusts, or they were like little pods of companies that would get locked together and decide what to charge for prices and how much to supply. And so these trusts were created. It was really hard for another shop to get started. So what the government did, fulfilling their role in promoting competition, is they actually created the antitrust laws that said you cannot do this. You can't grow or connect with these other businesses like this if it's going to give you an unfair advantage in the market. Pretty cool. All right, guys, we are on to role number 5 of the government, and this is to resolve market failures. All right, so what is a market failure exactly? A market failure is something negative with cost that occurs from a corporation making a good or a service. So let me paint a picture for you. You've got a great big factory over the hill, and they are producing glow-in-the-dark star stickers that you can put on your ceiling, because those are really cool. So this corporation that's making these really cool glow-in-the-dark star stickers that you put on your ceiling, they are making these and they're making a lot of money from it, but what they may or may fail to realize is that they're also polluting the river and the back wooded area by their factory due to their pollution created from production. So the company is making profit from their process, but they are actually pushing a cost onto other people. That's not cool. So government steps in this role And they resolve it by either making the company cut down on pollution or by fining them and paying back an X amount. So market failures, they step in and help us there too. All right, so to summarize, the effects of government regulation, there's definitely the advantages and there's some disadvantages. So starting to take a look at the advantages of government regulation. You definitely have an increase in health and safety standards. Companies have to meet those minimum standards or else, blah, blah, blah. We have the antitrust laws and the monopolies not being able to form, so our mom and pop shops are still protected as well as smaller businesses. So there's competition, which can also drive the prices down, which help us as consumers. Hooray! And then they can also find companies that are polluting or doing things that are having a negative cost outside of their production for other people. So the disadvantages of regulation. Regulation a lot of times slows things down. Sometimes you might hear it called red tape. All right, so regulation definitely slows things down, which means it takes longer to produce things in our economy. On top of that, it usually costs more money too, because there might be, a regulation to wear a hairnet. Now businesses all have to buy hairnets for their employees. Maybe there's a special type of helmet that you have to have on a construction site, or you have to have X amount of bathrooms for X amount of employees. These are things that companies have to follow. So there are some disadvantages to that cost degree, but there's also a flip side. So there's something known as deregulation, and those are times when the government has actually stepped in and said, you know what, we are not going to regulate anymore. We're going to take those laws and go ahead and null and void them, and go ahead, businesses, do what you want. So there are advantages to deregulation as well. Deregulation awesomeness number one is that it does usually speed up efficiency, which means prices drop. So when the government doesn't slow things down, things often get cheaper. Pretty cool. Ted thinks so too. Yep. Deregulation also gives companies or corporations a little bit more freedom to choose to produce how they'd like. Now, there are some disadvantages to deregulation as well, and that's, of course, our quality levels of health and safety may not necessarily be followed through, and that can result in some pretty bad outcomes. If anybody has ever heard of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, just let your brain go there.